My husband disappeared, and years later his sister showed up in a luxury car and simply said, "Get in." 3 years after my husband's disappearance in a mysterious accident, the pain still lived with me every day. I had sacrificed everything for his family, remained silent in the face of humiliation, and accepted living in the shadow of the memory of a love cut short. But nothing prepared me for the moment when his sister, who had vanished without a trace, appeared driving a luxury car and told me to get in, without any explanation. In that instant, with my son in my arms and my soul in pieces, I got not only into the car, but into a journey that would completely change my life. Today I carry deep marks, but also discoveries, choices, and twists that transformed me forever. I am happy that you are here. Follow my story to the end and comment which city you are watching from. I really want to know how far this story will reach. The rain fell heavily, as if the sky were collapsing along with my life. Vivian held the door firmly, her eyes full of rage, shouting words that hurt more than the biting cold. "I do not accept any more excuses, Hannah. A family vase, do you understand? Family." It was all because of a silly accident. Ezra had tripped and the vase shattered. I begged, apologized, tried to explain. But she just pointed outside, and seconds later we were on the sidewalk soaked. Ezra sobbed quietly in my lap, not understanding why his grandmother seemed to hate us now. Every drop of rain felt like a slap, a cruel reminder that we no longer had a home. I clung to him, trying to cover his little body with my thin coat. No one in the house appeared to intervene. No one opened the window to ask if we were okay. They had everything, and we had nothing. I wanted to scream, but my voice died of fear. The gate closed behind us with a dry snap, almost symbolic. We were out. Expelled. The world seemed too big for me, and I was smaller than I had ever been before. Ezra looked at me, his eyes wide, trusting me to protect him. But I was lost. The rain had already soaked through to my bones, and the wind made my body shiver. With my feet sinking into the mud, I could only think, where will I sleep with my son now? The empty sidewalks reflected my loneliness. The city that always seemed alive was now a shadowy figure, where every headlight was a reminder of what I had lost. 3 years taking care of that house, being submissive, swallowing every humiliation from Vivian for the love of my son and the memory of Matthew. 3 years without a word from him, living on what was left, always believing that what I was doing had a purpose, that I was honoring my son's father. But now, I just felt like an idiot. I remembered the nights I waited for Matthew with a cold dinner and a silent prayer. The time I thought I heard his voice on the radio and cried for hours. And the promises I made to myself when I received the news about the plane. "Stay strong, Hannah. Do this for him. Take care of your son." I had erased myself completely. Only the mother remained, the widow, the maid of the Whitaker house. I didn't even know who I was anymore. Was I ever anyone? The rain was lessening, but the pain was increasing. I sat on a bus bench, protecting Ezra with the little that remained of my body and my dignity. He was sleeping now, his face pressed against my chest. And I just wanted him not to feel what I felt. Fear. Humiliation. Helplessness. My fingers trembled not only from the cold but from the fury that was beginning to awaken. A spark deep in my chest. How could Vivian do this? How did I have so much faith in that family? Was all of this for nothing? The lights of the bus terminal seemed to shine with contempt. No one there cared. People passed by hurriedly, avoiding me as if I were invisible. Ezra woke up and started to cough. I wrapped him tighter, trying to transfer warmth with soft words, but my heart was in panic. His little cold body was like a knife in my womb. Every shiver of his reminded me of everything I could not offer. I wanted to scream for help, but who would listen? I looked around, searching for some soul who could help us. A social worker, a kind driver, anyone. But everyone seemed part of an indifferent crowd. My soaked shoes stuck to the dirty floor, and I felt exhaustion weigh like stones on my back. I didn't know if I could take another step. My throat burned with held-back tears. Ezra asked with a weak voice, "Mommy, do we have a home?" I just hugged him tighter. It was then that I heard a different sound. A low, powerful engine that contrasted with the noisy buses of the terminal. I turned my face and saw the headlights of a luxury car approaching slowly. A black Cadillac with tinted windows and impeccable condition. The car stopped right in front of us. The window rolled down, and my heart stopped for a second. I knew that face even after 3 years. It was her. A black Cadillac stops in front. Behind the wheel, a woman I haven't seen in 3 years. "Get in the car, Hannah," she said with a firm voice and serious eyes. It was Jade, Matthew's younger sister, the renegade daughter who had disappeared after the funeral. I hesitated, but Ezra was shivering so much that I could not afford to refuse. I got into the back seat, hugging my son as if we were still in the rain. The car was warm, silent, welcoming. But something told me that the true storm was still to come. Jade did not look back. She drove for a few minutes in silence until she said, "I saw what happened today. Vivian is a monster. And it isn't just that, Hannah. I know things. About Matthew." My entire body tensed up. No one had spoken of him for so long. How could she know anything? "Why now?" She accelerated a little and completed, without looking at me, "I have a secret about your husband." The apartment was a stark contrast to everything I had just lived through. Persian rugs, glass panels, modern furniture, and the scent of lavender in the air. Jade gave us dry clothes, a hot bath, and hot chocolate for Ezra. While he slept on the sofa, she called me to an isolated room. On the TV screen, she projected a recording. Vivian's voice was unmistakable. "That girl is a leech. And the boy? A dead weight." I felt my stomach turn. Jade paused the video and looked at me with burning eyes. "They planned to get rid of you from the beginning. I heard everything while hiding. That was why I disappeared. I have been investigating ever since. Gathering proof. Spying. Living in the shadows." I sat down in shock. The words still echoed in my head. Parasite. Dead weight. How could they say that about us? About Ezra? I wanted to cry, but anger dried me up inside. "They see you as a parasite, Hannah. And Ezra too." She pulled a black folder from the safe built into the wall and opened it on the table. Bank documents, statements, and a letter signed by Matthew. Vivian's name was on several transactions. She had transferred $200,000 from an account in Matthew's name to a risky investment fund. And she had lost everything. I could barely breathe. Jade pointed to one of the sheets. This was the trigger. They used his money to speculate on land. And when he found out, she took a deep breath, as if she were also trying to understand the monstrosity of what she had discovered. "Matthew didn't die in an accident, Hannah. He was about to report his own mother. And then, he disappeared." My body went cold. Every detail made sense now. Matthew's urgency in the final weeks. The nervousness. The interrupted conversations. I wanted to scream, but I had no voice left. Jade looked at me fixedly. "They killed Matthew for money, Hannah." I was sitting on Jade's sofa, watching Ezra play with an old toy car she had found in a chest. My mind was spinning endlessly. Then, like lightning cutting through the dark, I remembered the last conversation I had with Matthew before the plane trip. "If I don't come back, open that box." I had completely forgotten about that. Why? Maybe because it hurt too much to remember. But now everything made sense. That box could have the answers I was missing. I remembered where it was. I had kept it carefully, wrapped in an old cloth, at the bottom of the closet in our bedroom. The problem was that the room now belonged to Vivian, the mother-in-law who kicked me out, the woman who perhaps had blood on her hands. My heart raced at the simple idea of going back to that house. But one thing was certain, I needed that box. That was the only request Matthew had made to me before vanishing. It is hidden in the house. In the room that is now Vivian's. Jade tried to convince me to wait, to think it over, but I had already decided. I would return as a maid. I would play the role of someone who regretted everything, who begs for forgiveness. I knew Vivian would love to see me crawling. She always wanted to lower me, and now she would have the chance. I would do whatever was necessary to enter that house again. If it meant swallowing a little more of my pride, I would swallow it with pleasure. For my son. For Matthew. For the truth. I assembled the plan carefully. It was simple and at the same time risky. Knock on the door with Ezra, apologize, say we were sorry that we had nowhere to go. Appeal to her vanity and the pleasure she took in dominating me. And then wait for the right moment to act. It would be like walking on shards of glass. But I was no longer afraid of pain. The pain of losing everything was greater. She will want me back to humiliate me. Great. When I knocked on the door of the Whitaker mansion, my heart felt like it was hammering inside my chest. Vivian opened it with an expression of triumph, like someone who was already expecting this. I made myself submissive with my eyes down and my voice choked up. I said we had nowhere to stay, that I begged for a chance to prove my regret. She looked at me like a cat that has just captured a mouse. She smiled. That cruel smile I knew so well. And then she agreed with a nod of her head. In the first few days I cleaned, cooked, took care of the plants and even scrubbed the stair steps with a toothbrush like in the old days. But now I was a different woman inside. I had a plan, a mission. And every task she gave me was one more step toward my goal. Vivian loved to show me off to visitors as the girl who returned humiliated. And I accepted it. Inside I was screaming. Outside I smiled. It was the silent war I needed to win. I waited. I studied the routine of the house. I knew exactly the times Vivian went out to the gym, to the salon, to the Thursday teas. I waited for the house to be empty. I couldn't make a mistake. Ezra stayed with Jade that day. There was no room for distractions. I walked up the stairs with firm steps, put on the gloves Jade had given me, and opened the door to the old room. Everything was different, but my memory knew where to look. I went straight to the closet behind the last drawer. There it was. The box was dark wood, simple, without a lock. My heart beat so hard it seemed to echo on the walls. With trembling hands I lifted the lid. It was empty. A cutting emptiness, a hole in my stomach. I couldn't believe it. Had I come all this way, risked everything to find this? It was then that I looked at the shelf. A photo of our wedding framed in silver. Something seemed strange. The frame was crooked. I took the photo, turned it over. Behind it, taped with adhesive tape, was a micro SD card. What is on this memory card? I kept the micro SD in my pocket with the delicacy of someone holding a life. The box went back to its place as if nothing had happened. But now I needed to act fast. Vivian could return at any moment. The only way to justify my presence there was to create a distraction. So in a few minutes I began to ransack the room. I knocked over books, opened drawers, scattered sheets. It needed to look like a break-in. Chaotic but with logic. And above all, convincing. I ran downstairs, forcing a tone of desperation in my voice. I waited near the entrance until I saw Vivian's car approaching. As soon as she got out, I started screaming. Help! Please! My eyes watering, my hair disheveled, my hands shaking. All part of the role. Vivian ran inside and I said, Thief! Someone broke in. I think someone's still here. She went up the stairs with the security guard behind her, suspecting nothing. The chaos had begun, and I needed to keep control. Thief! Mama, someone broke in. I accompanied them up the stairs, feigning fear. The security guard searched the rooms hurriedly. Vivian opened doors violently, cursing every saint. The room really looked violated, but nothing had been stolen. And that was what she would tell the police if she called them. It was the perfect crime type, without losses, without traces. Just a scare. She raged, saying that Atlanta was taken over by bandits. And I continued acting, lowering my head, pretending to be frightened. The room was closed, and soon after she calmed down. She said I must have imagined things. The security guard stated there were no signs of forced entry. Even better. That would end the conversation. At night, while washing the dishes, I felt the micro SD touch my skin, kept in the inner pocket of the old jacket Jade had given me. There, invisible to everyone's eyes, was the key to the truth. The card is in the inner pocket of my jacket. The hiding place was a cramped room at the back of an abandoned warehouse that Jade had renovated with the basics. Mattresses on the floor, a mini fridge, black curtains, and an unstable internet signal. Despite the precariousness, it was the safest place I had been in months. Ezra slept curled up in a blanket, Jade organized old folders, and Ethan connected the laptop in silence. I held the memory card tightly between my fingers. My hands trembled as if they were holding dynamite. When we inserted the micro SD, the folder The Truth appeared. It is time. Inside the folder there were 3 videos and 2 encrypted documents. Ethan started with the first video. The image shook a little, but it was clear. Matthew standing facing Vincent and Walter, in a room I recognized immediately, the old office at the construction company headquarters. The atmosphere was tense. Matthew held a folder so firmly that his fingers were white. These lands have owners, Vincent. I won't agree to this. Vincent in turn was calm, almost bored. You already agreed. Your name is on all the contracts. The video continued with an intense exchange of accusations. Walter merely murmured, clearly dominated by fear or guilt. Matthew threw papers on the table. Vincent challenged him with phrases like, "You don't know who you are dealing with." Ethan paused the video to analyze one of the documents. He zoomed in on the image. It was a contract with Matthew's name, authorizing property transfers. "This is forged," Jade murmured. "And I knew it. My husband would never sign something like that." That was the proof he was being framed, surrounded on all sides. The second video had a different tone. Matthew was alone. The camera seemed attached to the shelf, filming from above. He looked directly into the viewfinder, his eyes tired, like someone who knew this would be his last resort. "If I disappear, please do not believe them," he said, his voice choked up. "Vivian, Walter, Vincent. They are all involved. Everything is in the contract. Follow the money." And then he pointed to the underside of the desk. The camera tilted and showed a flash drive taped with black tape. "This contract is the key to everything." Jade stood up and began to pace the room, rubbing her hands on her face. He left everything. The proof, the names, even the location. He tried. He tried so hard. The third video quickly showed Matthew talking to an unknown man. But before we could focus on the conversation, we saw the image of the hidden flash drive once again. Ethan zoomed in on the scene. If that is still there, it could be the missing piece. I felt a chill in my stomach. To return to that house. To break in again. Everything gave me chills. But I knew I would do whatever was necessary. We are going to have to break in again. Sleeping that night was impossible. I spent hours looking at Ezra, feeling guilt, fear, and anger mixed like a poison. Matthew trusted me, and now I carried the responsibility of finishing what he started. Jade was determined. She made a quick call to a man named Marcos, a lone shark with a raspy voice who seemed to hate Vivian more than any living person. He had been deceived by her in the past, and was willing to return the humiliation. Jade explained the plan. He would simulate a robbery, and I would act in the middle of the chaos. While they enter through the front, you enter through the back. Marcos brought 2 henchmen. They would use fake weapons, masks, and everything would be timed. Ethan synchronized watches. The Whitaker mansion would be full that afternoon. Vivian, Walter, and a new maid. The action would be at 4 p.m. sharp. At 3:30 p.m., I was already positioned behind the greenhouse in the back garden. I felt my heart hammer as if it wanted to escape my chest. My hands sweated, the air seemed thin. At 4:01 p.m., I heard the crash of the broken gate, followed by screams. Time to act. The back door was unlocked as always. The kitchen empty. I ran through the hallways like a shadow, dodging the noises coming from the living room. I went up the stairs quickly, hoping no one would see me. In the hallway, the air seemed denser. My entire body trembled. I reached the office, entered, and locked it from the inside. I ran to the desk, knelt, and ran my hands underneath. My fingers found the tape. There was the flash drive. I tore the tape with my teeth and kept the object inside my bra. I turned to leave. And then, footsteps. There are footsteps coming. Quick. I turned off the light and hid under the desk. The sound of the doorknob turning echoed in the room. The door opened slowly. It wasn't one of the henchmen. The sound was different. Paused, silent, like someone who knew what they wanted. I saw the shoes, polished black leather. Then a tall silhouette, dressed in a dark suit. He didn't say anything. He just observed the environment. His eyes scanned the room with unsettling calm. He walked to the desk. My body froze. I held my breath, feeling sweat run down my back. Who was that man? He left without saying a word. I waited 10 seconds. 20. Then I crawled to the side window. I unlocked it, climbed the sill, and jumped to the low roof of the kitchen. From there, I leaped into the garden, falling onto dry leaves. I ran to the side exit, where Jade was waiting for me inside the car with the engine running. I got in without looking back. The flash drive was still firm against my body, hot like a spark about to explode. Who is this man so interested in the same flash drive? The silence of the room weighed heavy while Ethan connected the flash drive to the notebook. The screen blinked and opened a folder with audio files organized by dates. I clicked on the first one. Vincent's voice sounded metallic, loaded with threat. Either you resolve this or you are also dead. It was with Walter. I recognized the tremors in my father-in-law's voice, the fear hidden behind the omission. Vincent pressured him, made it clear that the problem was Matthew, and that he needed to disappear. Another audio revealed even more. Walter hesitated, said it was dangerous, that Hanami would suspect, but Vincent was direct. She won't do anything. She is already broken. My stomach turned. Jade walked from one side to the other, clenching her fists, swallowing her anger. That was more than blackmail. It was conspiracy. It was a crime. And the absence of a body made every phrase seem more grave. I could barely breathe when Ethan spoke, with his eyes fixed on the screen. Matthew might be alive. Time stopped. I stared at the possibility like someone watching a bridge being rebuilt in the middle of an abyss. Jade approached and opened a folder of hers, containing screenshots, old messages, and location logs. A timeline of terror. It was more than intuition. It was a silent investigation, built with pain. The voices in the audios matched the warnings Matthew had left in the final weeks before the accident. Every piece of the puzzle began to fit. For an instant, hope burned stronger than fear. The image of Matthew alive appeared shyly, like an old memory trying to return to the light. But now there were indications. Recorded voices. Names. Orders. The truth was no longer hidden. Vincent wasn't just a corrupt businessman. He was a monster. And Walter, his cowardly accomplice. Matthew might be alive. In Jade's files, there were screenshots of strange messages that Matthew allegedly received before disappearing. They all seemed cold, accusatory, as if they had been written by someone close. Jade frowned, recognizing words and phrases. These messages, they look like mine. She slid her finger across the screen, and the shock fell upon us like lightning. It was her number. Her own cell phone had been used to manipulate her brother. But she never wrote that. It was Walter. With help from Vivian, they had cloned or stolen her cell phone. They created fake messages to drive the two apart. You betrayed the family, Matt. Jade is on the wrong side. Messages with calculated words to isolate Matthew, to make him believe he was alone. My heart tightened imagining his look, betrayed by everyone, even by the sister he loved most. Jade fell into a sitting position, her eyes full of water. Ethan sighed. They didn't just want to destroy you. They wanted to make you hate each other. I remembered Matthew's contained anger, the veiled fights before the trip. Always hesitant, always pressured. And me blind, just trying to keep the house standing. Jade blamed herself, but I hugged her. None of that was her fault. Their pain was architected, molded with cruelty. The Whitaker family was a web of lies, and we were the insects. But now we were awake, and ready to fight back. He thought his own sister betrayed him. Ethan stood up suddenly, opened his backpack and took out a small device. Matthew gave me this weeks before the accident. He said, if something happens, activate it. It was a tracker. Small, discreet, with a button that looked like it had never been touched. Ethan connected it to the laptop, activated the signal. The screen updated slowly, until a red dot appeared on the map. Isolated. In the interior of North Carolina. Asheville. A remote location near a forgotten trail. The silence in the room was almost sacred. I approached, looking fixedly at that pulsing dot. That was it. A signal. A location. A chance. Jade wiped her face and nodded. If he is there, we are going to get him out. Ethan was already preparing everything: routes, security, communication. Adrenaline ran through me like fire. After 3 years of darkness, a spark appeared. And I knew what to do. There is life at that point. The plan was simple but dangerous. Jade received a message from an unknown number. Your mother had an accident. Urgent. Asheville. Despair took over her. Without thinking, she took the car and left. We tried to stop her, but she said she needed to be sure. Ethan suspected a trap. But it was too late. The last message guided her to a dirt road, deserted. An old house at the end of the trail. What seemed like help was a cruel trap. Jade knocked on the door, screamed for help. Two men emerged from the shadows, armed. She tried to run, but it was too late. She was dragged inside, thrown onto the wooden floor, handcuffed. One of the men laughed. The family is reuniting little by little. She realized then that no one there was hurt. The message was fake. Part of a larger plan. Her mouth was gagged, and the basement was opened. Dark steps, humidity in the air. She is being taken to the basement. Hours later, already alerted by Jade's GPS, Ethan and I followed the same path, but by another route. We parked far away, advanced on foot, silent, following the chip signal. The house seemed abandoned at first glance, but there was movement in the back. We heard an electric hum like generators. Strong winds blew through the trees. I felt my heart beat to the rhythm of the ground. Ethan held me before the stairs. There is someone here. I nodded and continued. We broke open the back door. Everything there smelled of mold and abandonment, but the furniture was recent. We went up, nothing. Silence. We went down, and there it was, an iron door, locked from the outside. We heard moans, muffled screams. Jade. We broke the lock, and what we saw took my breath away. My sister-in-law was tied up, injured but alive. And behind her, lying in a corner, thin, unrecognizable. Matthew. Time stopped. I fell to my knees. There are people down there. He tried to get up but fell again. His eyes sought mine, and a weak sound came from his lips. Hannah. I cried, approached, touched his face. It was cold but still there. Jade murmured his name through her teeth, emotional. It was then that the basement door opened again, not by us. Vincent. Gun in hand. Behind him, one of the henchmen. Good. Family reunion. He pointed at me. The flash drive. Now. Or he dies for good. Vincent enters armed and makes a final proposal. The USB or Matthew dies. The smell of the basement was of mold, fear, and urgency. Vincent's gun pointed at Matthew left no room for errors. I had the fake flash drive in my hand, wrapped in a cloth handkerchief, and my heart beat so hard I could barely think. My skin burned with tension. Vincent stretched out his hand, demanding the delivery. Or he dies now. I hesitated for a second, looking at Matthew, who could barely keep his eyes open. Then I took a deep breath and handed it over. He fell. Vincent grabbed the object with a satisfied smile and shoved it into his jacket pocket. I knew one of you would do the right thing, he murmured, turning the gun back to Matthew, as if he still wanted to show control. I took a step forward, trying to distract him to keep his attention on me. That was when the wall behind us exploded in noise, shattered wood, shouts, orders. Ethan appeared with a bulletproof vest, followed by Ben and two armed agents. Vincent turned surprised, but it was already too late. The shootout was short but intense. One of the henchmen tried to react and was subdued. Vincent tried to flee through the back but slipped while trying to climb the stairs. Ethan immobilized him with a blow to the shoulder. Matthew was protected by one of the agents, who pulled him away from the line of fire. I ran to him, falling to my knees beside him. It's over, I whispered. But it wasn't over. Upstairs we heard running. Jade shouted. Vivian and Walter are fleeing. The hunt had not finished yet. Vivian and Walter tried to flee. Two cars waited in the garage, but the police were faster. Walter surrendered without resisting. Vivian, however, tried to escape through the service entrance. Jade reached her first, holding her by the arm. I found her being handcuffed, with her eyes in fury and her mouth spitting accusations. Ben approached me calmly, while the agents searched the house. It was close, he said. But everything happened exactly as we planned. That sure look put me on alert. Then he revealed you won, Hannah. But the emotional war is just beginning. The sea was a soft and constant song. A year had passed since that night in the basement, and everything still seemed like a distant dream, wrapped in mist and pain. The sand was hot under my feet, but the wind was fresh. I sat under the beach umbrella with a book open in my lap and my eyes on Ezra, who ran screaming with joy through the shallow waves. Sterling beside me observed in silence. He still limped, still had marks, but he was alive. And free. Is the nightmare really over? The house where we lived now was simple, right on the sand, with large windows and the smell of sea breeze. There was no luxury, no cameras, no dark corridors. Only life, peace, and some good mess. Jade came to visit us on a golden afternoon, bringing a bottle of wine and a stack of newspapers. Now she was an investigative journalist, awarded, respected, and feared by corrupt people in half a dozen states. We hugged for a long time, saying nothing. We cried without tears, laughed without sound. She had also been reborn. Jade spread the newspapers on the porch table. On one of the covers, the photo of Vivian being taken away in handcuffs with the headline, "The Whittaker Empire Crumbles." In another, a headline that read, "The Widow Who Uncovered Everything." I didn't recognize myself in those pages, but when I looked at Sterling, at Ezra, at Jade, I knew who I was. Not a victim. Not a piece in the machine. I was the woman who survived the fall and built a bridge with her own broken pieces. I closed my eyes. The wind caressed my face, and I let the breeze enter deep into my lungs. The waves broke with rhythm. Time didn't erase everything, but it healed. Matthew still had nightmares. Ezra still asked if bad grandma was going to get out of jail. But there was more laughter than crying. More good days than bad. And that was everything. I felt light for the first time. Some battles mark you forever. Others set you free. I never quite understood when they said that peace made noise. For me, peace was silence. A silence different from the one that precedes a tragedy. It was a calm, breathable silence, with the taste of a new beginning. It was what I felt now, sitting on the porch of our house by the sea, watching the sky stain orange while Ezra drew a sandcastle and Sterling put up a new hammock between two coconut trees. It was hot, but the wind played with my hair. And for the first time in a long time, the weight on my chest had lessened. Living after everything was harder than I expected. I thought that when Vincent was arrested, when Vivian and Walter were judged and convicted, when the newspapers published the truth, everything would go back to normal. But what is normal after being betrayed by those who called you daughter? After living with fear, mistrusting every face, carrying your son in your arms afraid that something would take him from you? Normal for me had to be rebuilt with great care. Brick by brick. Breath by breath. In the first few months, Sterling barely spoke. He spent hours sitting on the sand, looking at the sea with a lost gaze. Sometimes he woke up screaming at night, panting, his body wet with sweat and his eyes fixed on the ceiling. I learned not to ask, just to hold his hand until he came back to me. Other times it was he who found me sitting in the dark, clinging to an old t-shirt I had kept since he disappeared. Our traumas recognized each other in silence, each in their own time but never moving away from the other. Ezra was the first to smile for real. Children have an impressive capacity to be reborn. He didn't understand everything that had happened, but he knew we were together. That was enough. He said the sea house was magical because the wind told good stories. I smiled whenever I saw him run through the sand, free, light, carrying only childhood and not the debris of the history he inherited. He was 5 years old when it all started. Now, at 6, he seemed stronger than many adults I knew. Jade came whenever she could. After the series of reports she published, her name became a reference. But she refused all TV invitations. "I don't want fame, I want justice," she said with that determined shine in her eyes. She didn't stop for a minute. She continued unearthing truths, destroying lies, exposing powerful people. And even so, whenever she arrived here, she went back to being just Jade, my soul sister. Once she asked me, "Will we ever live without looking over our shoulder?" I didn't know how to answer. The hearings were long and painful. I had to sit before Vivian and recount every detail, every wound. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't try to deny it. She just stayed there, cold as always. Walter, on the contrary, crumbled. He cried, tried to justify himself, blamed Vincent, blamed fear, blamed blind love. But no explanation would return the 3 years I lived without Matthew, without a home, without ground. The sentence came. Life imprisonment for Vincent, 30 years for Vivian, 20 for Walter. I didn't celebrate. I just closed my eyes and released the air held for so long. The press called me a heroine. Some people wanted me to give lectures, write a book, become a symbol of overcoming. I refused everything. I didn't want to be a trophy of tragedy. I didn't want to relive that as a spectacle. I just wanted to live. Wake up with the smell of coffee. Hear Ezra laugh at cartoons. Feel Sterling breathe beside me. That was enough for me. Heroes have epic endings. I just wanted peace. And perhaps a vegetable garden in the backyard, something I never had at the Whittaker mansion. Sometimes I still dream of the past. The rain, the wet suitcase, the bus station, the black Cadillac arriving. The memory doesn't disappear, but it transforms. Pain turns into warning, strength, shield. I learned that some wounds don't close, but they also don't bleed anymore. They just remind us that we survived. There are nights I wake up scared, thinking everything was an illusion. That Matthew is still missing. That Jade never came back. But then I hear his snoring, the wind in the roof thatch, and I remember that we are here. Real. Alive. Matthew changed. He still carries the marks of captivity, the absences, the doubts. But there is a shine in his eyes when he looks at Ezra. There is sweetness in his gestures. He built a swing for the boy and spends entire afternoons teaching him how to tie the ropes. Every now and then he looks at me like someone asking forgiveness for everything, even for what wasn't his fault. And I hug him, remembering that forgiveness was already given the moment he whispered my name in the basement. I also changed. I am no longer the woman who asks for permission to exist in others' houses. Today I have a voice, and it is firm. I learned not to shrink, not to accept crumbs, to recognize when love is disguised control. I learned that being a mother is being a lioness but also being a cure. That fighting doesn't always mean winning, but never ceasing to try. Today, every step I take is for me, for Ezra, for all the women who one day doubted their own strength. And if someone asks me what I would do differently, maybe I would answer nothing. Because it was in the dark that I discovered my light. It was in betrayal that I found true alliances. It was in the fall that I built my foundation. Every tear taught me to recognize true joy. Every closed door led me to the right window. And every no I heard prepared me for the most important yes, the one I gave myself when I decided not to give up. Today there are more plants on the porch than pain in the chest. There are more stories on the shelf than secrets under the bed. There is more music in the kitchen than silences in the hallway. And that is enough for me. I don't need a perfect life. I just want a life of my own. A life where I can look back with pride, forward with hope, and inward with peace. I close my eyes now and hear Ezra call my name. The sea continues breaking on the sand, like a heart that insists on beating. I get up from the chair, wipe my hands on my dress, and walk to my son. He smiles, and I smile back. Time doesn't erase, but it transforms. Because some scars are invisible, and even so they remind us every day of who we chose to be. Now I am curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you gone through something similar? Support the channel. Subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. I am leaving on the end screen another story that you will also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until the next video.